Hi, my name is Robin, and this is a film that inspires hope, and it's an acronym from a project that has been created, and the acronym stands for Hearing Other People's Experiences. This is a project that I really wanted to create because really what I see so true in the world today is that not many people are sharing what's really going on with them in fear of being judged, assessed, or not understood by other people. And in these shares, you're going to meet women that tell their stories about what their life used to look like and what happened and how they overcame adversity. And so whether you're in a struggle or you know someone who's facing a struggle, I really hope that you can just consider for yourself where this fits into your life, how you can now reach out to somebody else that maybe is in a difficult situation. And although we may not have gone through something like these women will be talking about, we all get what pain feels like, what suffering feels like, what love feels like, and acceptance, and true friendship. So please enjoy these shares, and I really hope that you enjoy the film.
So a little bit about me is I had it rough as a child. No real connection ever with anybody. And I found connection in drugs. I found connection in violence, and I found connection all by myself. I found drugs and I found love. I found love for life, myself, or at least I thought I did for a long time. Most of my childhood, I struggled with not having parents that cared or anybody that cared about me. I grew up really fast, and I remember getting my first job when I was like 15, and I worked all the time, and I got high all the time. And I didn't run into problems with that until I was about 30. When I was 30, I went to jail for the first time, and I think that was the first time I realized that drugs were a problem, not a solution. I went to jail a few times after that, all right in a row, and you know, by this time I had children. I had great children who at that point were taken from me. And I really believe in that moment is when I lost everything. It took me about 3 months of a lot of crazy stuff and more trips to jail for me to realize that I needed to come up with a solution. I'm pretty solution based, and whether I was high or not, there was a problem and I had to fix it. So when I lost my children, I had in the back of my head that it was unacceptable. So quickly I got sentenced to like 5 or 6 months in jail, and I thought that I could beat the system and go to rehab. That wasn't my story. I went to rehab and still went to jail. But when I went to rehab, I relocated to Grass Valley, and I left everything and everybody I knew behind. And I went to treatment, and there is where I found a little bit of hope. And when I went to treatment, I was scared and alone, just like I was before. And but it's where I began to get some power and be able to line up some decisions and make a list of what I needed to really do to get back in my kids' life. And I went to jail still from there for like 6 months, and a random lady kept my daughter while I was in jail and brought her to visit me every single week. And that's when I first found trust in someone, because she did exactly everything she said she would. And everything she said she would. It was crazy. I've always known everybody to disappoint me and tell me things that never ever happened. So right there is where I found the first person I could trust. And it was someone I met twice. And she took very good care of my daughter. And when I got out of there, I went to a transitional living house, and I met this wonderful guy who was coming to look at my car. And from there, I met the next person I could trust. And Dave is probably one of my best friends still today. Somebody I can talk to about anything, no matter what. And I never feel judged. And this guy encouraged me and encouraged me and encouraged me to not give up no matter what. And he told me about this women's group, Project Heart. And I fought with going there and fought with going there and showed up randomly and stayed miserable for a while. And there were some women there that just poked and poked and poked and poked and poked and didn't stop no matter what. No matter if I was standoffish or angry or disconnected. And because of them, and because they always showed up, and because little things of like taking me to coffee or caring how my kids were, or if I needed a ride, or asking me if I was coming back, I got some more hope. And I learned to trust a few more people, and I made some real friends. And all of them I respect tremendously. And it took me a long time and a lot of work to really feel connected. Really feel connected. Not just that little bit of hope and trust, but feel connected, like I can call them no matter what. That they were going to be there no matter what. That I could be in a different city and they would show up. And I would listen to them because I respected them. And along with that respect, I learned a lot. And no matter how crazy my life got or how crazy I thought I was, they always just let me know that everything was going to be okay. And I had a place to come and share and get connected and feel love and feel friendship and be part of. And I'll never, ever be able to replace that with anything else. Ever. And there's where I learned how to be a better mom, a friend, dependable. I'll never forget the lady who told me that her time is valuable. And I need to start taking that into consideration. And I tell you that now I show up on time or early. And I learned to be, a lot of things caring there. I didn't care about anybody before I got there. And because people showed me what that looked like, now I know. I've got a job that I excel at, that I wasn't sure I'd be able to do, and they encouraged me to just keep going. Pulling my life forward is what one of them says. I love that saying, and now I have all three of my kids full-time. I have my own place to live. I have a great car. I have a handful of amazing friends. I have a bank account, something I never thought I'd have, and I wear clean clothes, and I haven't stuck a needle in my arm in over 2 years. I always thought I would just be a junkie, and now I'm not. I'm a mom and a friend, an employee, a manager at that. And because of that group of women, and because of the move, and the one good decision of moving to Grass Valley, and deciding to change my life for me and my kids, I have hope. That's all I got.
Hi, my name's Carly. I'm here to share my story. So I had a pretty normal childhood growing up for the most part. A few things early on in my life that I didn't quite put together until probably my mid-teens. Probably about between the age of 10 and 12 is when I really started to notice that it would affect the way that I feel about family and people around me. I came out at about 12 to my mother for being molested for quite a few years. It had been going on, and for some reason I think I took blame for that. It definitely didn't get resolved the way that I had envisioned, which I think led me to really be independent since then, and not really have trust in anybody. At about 15, just to kind of jump forward, I ended up moving out, had my own place, my own job, still continued school. Really didn't have much of the party life. Was always kind of an outsider, never really clicked or fit into anything. Did a little bit of sports, had one or two close friends. Never really dabbled in drugs or anything like that. It wasn't until I was about 16 that I started to kind of fall in with a crowd that I thought I felt like I belonged in. People that felt the same way, the black sheep, the outcasts, right? Which opened me to a whole new world, to say the least. So jumping forward from that, I had met a gentleman right before I turned 17, which, God, I thought he was the end-all be-all. Didn't have much experience in dating prior to that, and it all seemed fine and dandy for about the first year. And then I started to have little signs and symptoms of just where your gut doesn't feel like things are right. I kind of let it go. I worked a lot, and I was pretty much holding down the fort. He had legal issues that kept him from maintaining work and being able to be supportive, but I stepped up to the plate. Fast forward from that, I ended up getting pregnant about 19 with him, and that's where everything really changed. I never really planned on having kids. I'd really been estranged from my family and my mom for years at that point, being on my own. Once my son was born, that's when things really started to change. Instead of looking past things and letting it go, I was coming home early from work, finding people at my house, young girls in my house. I dealt with that for about 6 months, finally got out of that, and left with my, at the time, 18-month-old son. Got into a place of my own, still was working. I think we were there for about 3 months, and in the middle of the night, he decided to come shimmying up my balcony, obliterated drunk. Managed to get through my sliding glass door, woke me up. What turned from a altercation into a physical altercation. He ended up getting me pinned, had a butcher knife. That was it. I was pretty much thinking, I could tell by the way he looked at me that that was going to be my last night, and I would never see my son again. He made it very clear he was there to take care of me, and that he was going to take my son. And I don't know what came over me. It was pure strength. My son came out in the midst of all this. Mind you, he was not even 2 yet. Screamed out, "Daddy," and it delayed him long enough for me to get on my feet, grab him. I ended up getting choked out with him in my arms, which turned into another about 10-minute physical fight while trying to hold my son. I bit him, and I was able to get free. Running, mind you, this is 3 o'clock in the morning, running through an apartment complex, trying to find help, screaming for help. Took about 20 minutes, and I finally had to muster up, and having a screaming kid in your arms covered in blood really set the stage for me. I don't think I've ever been in that much fear in my life. I ended up having to come back to my apartment to get my cell phone to be able to call 911. Unfortunately, by the time that was somewhat resolved, they took pictures, couldn't find him for about 3 days, so I pretty much lived in fear. And then anger started to set in. And because we had, I guess, a common law child together in a previous relationship, it was my word against his. My son was too young to testify, so I kind of had to choke it and go on about my life. So in midst of having to go to court proceedings by myself, I got more angry and more angry. And I felt alone. I felt unjustified. I felt that nothing was ever going to change, and that I would always have to live in fear. And I think that's where I started to retreat instead of look for help. As it progressed, they basically slapped him on the wrist. I was in fear for months after that. He got put away for a violation, but that wasn't for a month down the road. So he would circle around my apartment. It was just anywhere I went, I was in total fear. I ended up having to ask my mom to take care of my son for a little while, and I went to my last court date, had to testify against him on the stand, and that didn't go as well. And I'd run into a friend I hadn't seen for years after this, and that was my first introduction to meth, and a whole new side of being able to bury my fears and pain into something that I didn't have to deal with. Months turned into a little over a year. My mom kind of knew, but there was nothing she could do about it. I ended up losing everything. I lost my job, my truck, my house, hit rock bottom. And I think it kept me out because I locked on to what a good parent I felt that I was, and that I felt that I couldn't do that anymore. So it's like you hold that good parent feeling, and you use, or at least I did, to not want to acknowledge what I was doing now. And that lasted for years. I mean, I should probably be dead 10 times over for the amount of crap I put myself through. And the duration, losing time with my son, losing firsts. In the end, I think it took about 6 arrests. I'd never had a juvenile record, never had any other record. And then finally my last arrest, which was, I mean, they pulled all the stops. We had a paddy wagon to pick up everybody. I was put on Star 94.3, made the front page of the paper, and that's all it took for my family to finally step up to the plate. But instead of helping me, they chose to try and take my son. I picked up a CPS case for a failure to protect because I did not give my mom legal rights. So that put me in a CPS case, which was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. I did about 9 months inpatient, which I fought for the first 60 days and refused to do any work. My son was placed in foster care with actually his dad's family, which made me trying to focus on myself a lot harder. Being fearful for him. My first overnight visit, I'll never forget it. We were brushing our teeth, and he had said that he was molested by one of the other kids, and I had reported that. There was nothing they could do. It took months before finally the family showed their true colors, and CPS was able to yank him and put him back in the care with my mom. And about 2 days after that is when I finally just let go and did my program. I signed up for DDC court on my own, did everything and then some that I could to make things better for him and better for myself, and to really dig deep as to what I want from here on out and how I'm going to go about it and not fall back into bad behaviors. I didn't want to go back to jail. I ended up doing an extra 90 days as an outpatient in tea house living. That was hard. The gals that had been there for a long time made it pretty difficult. They'd been there for a little over a year, and because of where I was at, I guess in my sobriety, they had asked me to kind of run the house, and that didn't go over well with the gals that should have been running it. So in the midst of all this, was also told that my mother and my family was not in a position to be a part of my sobriety, that I needed to do that on my own, which I understood. So I kicked butt. I showed up. Mind you, in the whole duration of this, I had a 2-inch pink mohawk, but I always dressed the part for court. I always did everything I could, and then some, served, secretaried, anything that I could to prove my worth, I guess, and to give Caleb just a better future. It took a little over 2 years. They finally closed my case. I had gotten my own apartment, was going to college, doing everything and anything that I could. And the crazy thing is had it not been for all this, I think the best part about it is looking back and being able to be a soldier for my mom now. My mom was never an alcoholic when I was younger, but it really got bad right when she took over my son, and that was about in her mid-40s. And it went from casual drinking to obliterated alcoholism. And there was nothing I could do, but now, because of everything that this community has offered me and the things that I've done through the system here, I'm able to be there for her as a support. So things are a lot better now. It definitely, the pain, the suffering doesn't ever go away. It's a matter of how you work through it, and really want to dig deep to find the truth of how you want things to be and what you're willing to do to make that happen.
Describe what your low point or rock bottom felt like to you.
My low point or rock bottom time of my life was when I was laying in bed and I didn't want to get up. I didn't want to live anymore. And my 2-year-old little boy came over and put his little hands on my face and said, Mommy, you need to get up. You need to get up and make us.
I decided that time of my life that my life wasn't for me. It was actually to finish raising my kids, and I needed to be there for them, and no matter what I was going through.
Where were you emotionally when you knew your life had to change?
Well, I've described this emptiness. My friendships were crumbling. I was alone and isolated. I felt every day like I wanted a new start the next day, but was powerless to do anything about it. Every day I'd wake up after having promised myself the night before no more, and I'd be on the same track every day. Until one day I remember the same routine that I did every night, that I looked forward to every single night, became boring. And I didn't know what to do in that moment because I didn't want to do anything. I felt empty, I felt bored, I felt so uncomfortable in my own skin that even breathing just didn't sound like it was worth it. Nothing sounded like it was worth it. And that's when I was met with this feeling inside of myself that the real me was in there trying to get my attention, throwing plates, like smashing things against the borders of my soul, trying to get me to see her. And that was when I saw her and had to accept that something had to change.
What fears and emotions surrounded you as you began to make these changes?
So this is a really good question, and this is kind of what got me through. My Aunt Cindy had told me at some point, and I was using at the time, she said, "Amanda, I challenge you to make yourself uncomfortable." And when I went into treatment, I really took that into consideration, and because I knew I was going to be uncomfortable, so I challenged myself every day to be uncomfortable and to learn to walk through that, because I didn't know how to. Every time I would cope with being uncomfortable, it would be with drugs. So I kind of just expected that I was going to be uncomfortable and that I needed to walk through it.
Why is being vulnerable and transparent with others so important?
Well, for me, being vulnerable and transparent is the complete opposite of what I used to be. I used to hide. I used to keep things to myself. I didn't think anybody cared. I didn't think anybody wanted to hear what I was going through. So today, in the groups that I'm involved in, being vulnerable, talking about what's going on in my life, just letting somebody know, like, hey, I'm not okay right now, helps me stay healthy and, most importantly, clean. And it also helps me realize that I'm not alone.
Hi, my name's Emily. Growing up, I witnessed a lot of addiction and violent behavior, and that led me to believe that it was okay to act like that. I devalidated myself, and I made poor life decisions, which included giving up my son. I watched my mom go in and out of my life a lot, and she chose drinking over me, and I swore I'd never be like her. And then later on in life, I ended up just like her. So I knew that giving my son to another family was the best answer because I wanted to break the cycle. I didn't want him to be like me. But I wasn't ready to change, so it took me a series of incarcerations and losing my mom in 2012. She overdosed due to her addiction. I knew that that's not what I wanted. I wanted something better for myself, for my son, and for everybody around me. So it came time for me to reach out, and I had to tell somebody that I had a problem with my anger, my violence, my destructive thinking, my low self-worth. That was the biggest part, was I didn't believe in myself. I thought that I could put on a mask and hide behind alcohol and drugs. And it took meeting a group of women that could point out to me that I had value and I had self-worth and courage and that I deserved something better. So I started learning the tools, like coping skills, all that negative self-talk that I was telling myself from when I was little, saying that I deserved what I got and that I deserved to be in the hole that I dug, I had to learn that that was a lie, and I had a lot more to live for. So I started looking up to God as my higher power, and I used the 12 steps to build myself into a better person, like finding self-acceptance and value and knowing that there's something left to give. Somebody out there, they could learn from what I went through. We don't have to be our past. We can look forward to something better in the future. We just have to reach out and tell somebody that we need help. And it's okay to need help, because we all need help sometimes. So I'm super proud of myself today. I openly communicate, and it feels good. I can set goals for myself, little goals, big goals, and when I accomplish them, I feel amazing. Like, I tell people I'm going to be somewhere, and I actually show up. It feels really good to be wanted, not just by the people around me, but by myself. Like, I actually want to be myself. I didn't know who I was when I was drinking. I became like a monster, somebody who was critical of everything and everyone. I really feel validated today. The other women that I talk to, they have the same stories that I do. We may not have done like the exact same things or made the exact same choices, but we're all on the same path now, and that's a path to greatness, a path to recovery. We get together and we do fun things. We go to the lake. We have group meetings. We do potlucks. We don't always just talk about recovery and stuff. Of course it comes up. But we get to bond, and we get to find similarities and hope and strength in each other. Like, I've never had anybody love me. I've never been able to love myself. And I finally feel like I've got that.
Hi, my name is Bethanys Walsh. I am a mother of 5 children and married to a wonderful man named Sean. I was born and raised into a Christian home. Went to church every Sunday. My parents always had a really rocky marriage. My dad had some drinking problems. My mother had some food issues. That really led me into a life of isolation, a life of guilt and shame for things that I kept secret from everyone else. About the age of 16, I started throwing up my food. I used food to cope with whatever I was feeling, whether that was rejection about a relationship in my life or what I was feeling towards my parents, just whatever. I started using food to deal with pain. Fast forward a couple years, that eating disorder became a drug addiction. It became an addiction to relationships with men, so many different things, so much addiction, so much pain. And, I lived so much of my life in secrecy. I always felt God wanting me to be honest with people and wanting to be vulnerable and transparent, but I was never able to because, like I said, I just lived in so much guilt. I lived in so much shame. And what I'm realizing now, as a 32-year-old woman, that so much of freedom has come into my life by being real and by being transparent and by being honest about the things that I'm going through in my life. And actually there's a direct connection by being honest and real with other people around me to God, to the Lord. And it brings so much freedom into my heart by just saying, hey, this is where I'm at. This is who I am. Behind the scenes, when the church service stops, this is what's really going on inside of my heart. And I think the biggest thing that's on my heart is that, we are not alone in our struggles. And so much of my past was spent thinking that I was alone, thinking that I was crazy, thinking that all the things that I went through in my life that nobody else was going through. And I'm actually finding out that the more honest I am with women around me, the more I realize that they're going through the same things that I'm going through. And in fact, by me being real, it enables them to be real, and it brings freedom to their lives, and it brings freedom into their hearts. And so it's my heart cry to speak out to women who are struggling in addiction, whether that's sexual addiction or food or drugs, that there is hope and that there is freedom. By being real and being transparent, just being like, God, this is where I'm really at. And then women can come alongside of you and speak into those places of vulnerability, speak into those places, and just love on those places. Because if you keep it secret, that's where the darkness works. That's where the enemy comes and just speaks those lies even more so, because you stay in isolation. So there's freedom and there's hope, and you're not alone.
Hi, so I'm Terry, and my life story started, with being born into a family that has generational incest. Parents divorced when I was 5, and I would be sent to stay with my dad occasionally, who really had no interest in me, but had an uncle who had a lot of interest in me. And from the age of 5 till almost 11, I was molested by him. From there, very quickly got introduced to drugs. And a lot of older men seemed to understand my hurt, too, and take advantage of that. And so by the time I was 15, I was heavily doing acid. I was so far involved in that I was already almost 4 months pregnant before I even knew. Somebody actually had to tell me. I was so out of tune with my body because I was just loaded all the time. And that was a year Roe versus Wade passed, so was able to conveniently take care of that because I didn't want to face what I had done to this child inside of me, because I'd been on acid the whole time he was growing in me. From there, by the time I was 17, I was introduced to intravenous drugs, all 3: crack, coke, heroin. Heroin became my true love, and so my life went on from there till I was 31. I was a heroin addict, and what that involves, for those that have been involved in drugs have an idea of what that involves, but your life is full of chasing that. It's running your life. You have no real say anymore. The drug has all the say as to how you will conduct yourself. And I used to have a lot of things where I'd say, if I ever do this, then I know I've gone too far. And every time I would turn around, if I ever did this, I had to get a little lower and a little lower and a little lower. And in order to continue to live with myself, I had to die inside. I had to stop being a feeling, living human being and just function and do what the drug said to do. So that's what I would do. And I did that. My last few years, I'd also gotten married in the Sacramento County Jail to a man, and part of the agreement was that I would bring his drugs, so I was a meal for him. And but anyway, there's a lot of things there that went on, and Andy and I were lost together. But there's a lot of ugliness that happens in life, what you do to people. So at any rate, that for me it was just I had to die to myself. I could not be a human being because I could not look at the things I did to other people and to myself. For me, my last year out on the street, I was living in the Tenderloin, in a hotel where you purchase it by the week, the month, the hour. And I was getting ready to move out of there because I only had enough to re-up or pay for the next day's hotel room. And I was moving out, and all of a sudden the Lord showed me that this is your life. It was going to be full-time prostitution, AIDS, prison, death. And I went across a mirror and I saw myself, and it was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. And I realized I didn't want to die. And I fell down on my knees and I cried out to the Lord, and I said, God, I don't want to die. And this time I completely surrendered and turned my life over to Him. It was the beginning of turning my life around, and that was at 31, and that was 30 years ago. And from there, God has done a lot of work. I've done a lot of work with Him. to transform this broken life. And so in that course of that time, I've, a lot has happened. A lot of transformation. I have a good job. I've, remarried. A lot of good things. But at any rate, Project Heart came along. Someone kept mentioning Project Heart about 1.5 years ago. And I, at this point, had completely distanced myself from anybody who'd been where I'd been for the most part. And but I felt the Lord leading me to go there. So I went and checked it out, and most of the women there were fresh from where I had been 30 years earlier, and I felt so far removed from that at that point, and I thought, man, I don't have anything to do with this anymore. This isn't part of my life. And I went home and I said, I just don't think this is for me, but I felt the Lord prodding me to still continue, and I said, okay, I'll check it out 4 more times, and that was one, Lord. And so I went back, and the next week there was one lady who offered to do a baby shower for a woman that was new to the group that nobody knew. And she said, I want to do this next Saturday, 6 days away. Who will come to this? And over 3/4 of the room raised their hand and said, I'll show up. They didn't even know this woman. And if I had gone to my job and said, look, I want to throw a baby shower for a lady in 6 days, and I know you don't know her, but who will come? I would have gotten so many reasons why people couldn't come. And I understand that, but it was like these women were willing to give of themselves. They showed up at this baby shower, and they loved on this woman. And the transformation that's happened in that woman's life is phenomenal. Because she was loved on, because she was cared for, because people were real. And that's something that I love, is that people are real. I mean, I used to, when I'd go to social settings, as I was changing my life, I didn't know how to fit in because I couldn't do this small talk stuff, how's the weather? But man, when I'd come to Project Heart, these women are real and vulnerable and speak truth and speak to the heart. And as I started giving my life to them and them to me, it was like this thing about, where it's better to give to receive. It's like, oh my gosh, I was getting so filled up. And one of the other things that really blew me away in this last year is that I thought I had already worked through a whole lot of things. Here I had 30 years clean, but as I kept being a part of this and being a part of what these women are still going through and putting myself into their lives, there are things that have been buried deep in me that God was showing, these are things you're still working out too, because you're right where they are too. We are all still working on things together. And I've just been so blessed being a part of Project Heart. I don't know what else more to say, but it's an awesome program. So,
what would you tell your younger self?
To not sweat so much, to not think about what other people want, to not walk on eggshells, to be myself, to be comfortable in my own skin. It's okay to be me or to be you. You're beautiful from the inside out. You don't need approval from anybody.
What would you tell your younger self?
I would tell myself that it is okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to be uncomfortable, and that I won't feel that way, for the long haul. That on the other side of that is growth. And probably just give all the suggestions that were given to me all throughout me going through my recovery, to reach out to others, to not isolate, to pray, and to surrender. I think that was really hard for me to do, and I think, that would be what I would tell myself.
Why is being vulnerable and sharing yourself with people so important?
It's a blessing all around. To share with somebody my vulnerabilities, my struggles, what I'm going through, is to get that out of my, head that spins things round and round and round, and never digest it. It gets it off of my heart. It is the antidote to shame. You know, when I feel like, oh, I can't tell anybody this, nobody's going to understand, this is my deepest secret or whatnot, or I messed up, sharing that and being vulnerable with somebody, and the right person. You know, I think that's what's so important about finding good friends and people you trust, because sharing that is such a risk, and to be held in that and to be heard and understood is the best feeling, in my opinion. And then when somebody is vulnerable enough to share with me about what they're going through or what they have gone through, I think we may all have felt at some point that somebody sharing their story has been able to help us feel like we're not alone. Maybe we can do this. You know, it's a source of inspiration to maybe go in that direction or change something we've been wanting to change. But testimony and sharing our story is what we must do as humans. In my personal opinion, we have to do it because we all have our story, and it's for a reason. And it not only helps ourselves, but it helps others when we share what we've been through, what we're going through, what we've overcome, and even our hopes and dreams in that aspect as well. So that's what I think.
Thanks so much for watching. I hope you feel moved, inspired, and transformed to take on your own life. Almost all of us are suffering to some extent, but suffering comes from our past, not our present. And what we bury alive stays alive. So find someone you deeply trust so you can share your most inner story. When we share our shame and we're transparent with what we're going through, shame dies. And shame can't live in the light. And so I just challenge you to really consider, what have you been holding on to that you could be set free from? And I hope that you go connect with somebody who is vulnerable and listen to their story, so you can continue to learn more about other people and deepen the relationships you already have by going even deeper. If you'd like more information, you can contact me at rtamietti2@gmail.com. God bless you, and thanks for watching.